I'd like to invite my good friend and business partner, Kevin Wheeler, onto the stage. Kevin will be joining us from San Francisco as his background shows. How are you, Kevin?
I'm fine, sitting right in front of the bridge. Yeah.
Lovely. Good to hear. I hope it's good. Not a windy day for you out there. So, Kevin, your fearless forecast, as you call it, you've been delivering this for. Well, that was the 19th one, wasn't it? This conference will be the 20th.
Yeah. Wow. I lose track. I know it's been a lot.
Yeah, and look, I have done my little recon over the years, and I've gone back and I've looked at them to see whether his predictions have come true, and there's a fair amount of spooky accuracy in there. Do you just want to kick off by telling us, like, where do you get all this content from? How do you come up with your predictions? What sort of data do you look at and trends do you follow?
My magic ball. That's what I use.
You've got a lot of thinking time.
Yeah. No, I think it's just a matter of lots of focus, first of all. That's kind of like what I do. So I spend a lot of time just focusing on what are the trends, what's going on. I read all sorts of blogs and Substacks and LinkedIn posts. I try to stay very current on all those things. What are the latest topics? And I chat with a lot of people at different events and conferences and clients. So it's a variety of sources. It's just really, it's kind of putting together a lot of disparate information and trying to see what makes sense. You know, what seems to be happening. What are the things that are ascending and what are the things that are descending, right? What are the things going down? And obviously it's a constantly changing dynamic world out there, and even more so with AI, that like we're going to hear about in a few minutes here. So,
and you have a slightly different sort of viewpoint on AI than I think what we do in Australia, because we're running trials for driverless cars, but it hasn't been launched. We haven't experienced that here. Yeah. But you know, if you go down to, say, Austin, Texas, you hop in an Uber, it's going to be driverless. If you order something on, you know, a Deliveroo, it's going to be like a little robot coming to your door, right?
In some of the cities, the Waymo cars, the Uber self-driving cars are everywhere, all over San Francisco, all over the Bay Area. It's kind of weird to get in a car with nobody driving it.
Yeah. And then you've got your big Amazon delivery centers. And so you've kind of experiencing a little bit of a different level of disruption to, I guess, what we're seeing here. But it's good to have a bigger, broader global lens on it. So we're very interested to hear what you've got to say. I'm excited to hear it again. So I'll hand over to you now, and I'll pop back up from time to time and jump in with some questions.
Okay, great. I'll start the presentation. And I call this the Great Realignment. I think this is really what's happening with not only AI, but with the demographic situation and the shortage of people in general, and the way work is being reshaped and redesigned, totally changing how we look at the workforce, which I'll talk about more. I think by the end of this decade, maybe before the end of this decade, we're going to see some incredibly significant changes, not only in recruiting, but in HR in general, and in organizations themselves and how they're shaped and how they're focused. I think this year, I think up until this year, we've been in, and maybe Australia is still there. It's what I call exploration, testing the water, playing a little bit with it. But I think this year and next year are going to be the year when we start really operationalizing AI. And we're going to see it in what we do every day more and more. We already see it in some areas, finance, fintech, some of these things, but we're going to see it in recruiting. I think this year will be the beginning of it for sure. So, as I said, this is a decade of reinventing what we are and what we do, what we think. I think it's going to challenge every assumption we've had about work, about recruitment, about almost everything. It's not just recruiting, it's economics, it's the world order, it's globalization. Everything is in flux and change, partly driven to some degree by the aftermath of COVID, but also heavily by AI and by the disruptive influence the US political situation has on the world right now. It's changing everything. So we're in a very different time, and we're going to have new skills, new attitudes, whole new paradigms about work that I'll talk a little bit about as we get into this. So many of you are probably familiar with the term VUCA, or volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that's a term that's been out there for at least a decade, I think, maybe even more than that. Been a very common way to kind of explain how we feel about the world and how we look at the world, as everything is volatile, it's very uncertain, it's really complex, and it's hard to understand, ambiguous. But I think that's changing a lot. And we're moving from VUCA to this newer term, which is really only couple of years old. In fact, a book has just been released, I think a month or so ago, in depth on this, called Bonnie, which is brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. So let's dive into that a little bit, because I think it's a fundamental concept that we need to be aware of and think about. And that brittle means things that appear to be strong and solid, but break suddenly, like a glass when you drop it on the floor. So the COVID, the supply chain, is a really good example of, we were living in a world with goods being shipped from China and all over the world. You know, we were dependent on other countries to get basic supplies like toilet paper and things that we need. And suddenly it all stopped. It just broke, boom, gone. And every country and every city and state had to scramble to figure out how do we fill in the gaps of what we can't get anymore. And what we're finding is more and more things that historically we have thought were solid and permanent and so forth are not. They're breaking. They're falling apart. Recruiting is one of those, I think, that's sort of falling apart. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But certainly, governments are falling apart now. Look at the U.S. Democracy maybe is more brittle than we ever thought. 250 years, we thought it's going to be here forever, and suddenly it's in danger maybe now. We don't know, but it's certainly not what it was. The world economic order totally changed. The alliances, NATO may fall apart. Something that we thought has been there for 80 years. We figured this is going to be here forever. It may not be. So all of these relationships that we've had, all of these things that we've relied on and felt were permanent are falling apart. And that's the brittle piece. And from that comes this sense of helplessness and fear. What are we going to do? How do we deal with this? We don't have any rules. We don't have any precedents. We don't have the legal structure to deal with most of this stuff. We're sort of swimming in an ocean with no life raft to go to, which is very nonlinear. It's a big connect. We have a cause. We know what caused it, but what's the effect of it? The effect is huge. Events aren't logical necessarily. So we may see our world in recruiting and HR. It doesn't look that much different than it looked last year. It's pretty good. Seems okay to me. Yeah, certainly AI is coming in there, but yeah, not a big deal. We had ATSs and other things. They came in, and this is different. I'm telling you, this is not the same. This is not going to be a linear, evolutionary, easily adapted process. It's very disproportional and disruptive, which makes it really hard to understand. It's just it's incomprehensible. We can't really explain what's going on. How do you explain what's going on in the U.S.? How do you explain what's going on in the hot spots of the world between China and Taiwan, between Ukraine and Russia and the EU? And how do you explain these things? And how are they going to play out? So we're in this very Bonnie world right now, and I think it's a world that we're going to have to come to grips with in recruiting and HR over the next few years. But moving on, the new realities are really that, machines and buildings, which were the hallmark of the 20th century, and maybe even before the 20th century, they're no longer that critical. I mean, they're important. We need machines, we need buildings, but they're no longer the foundation of businesses. Remote work, global work, people working remotely have reduced the value of buildings. In fact, the The amount of vacant real estate in large cities is growing, and not much demand for it, or less demand. Machines are becoming much more robotic and don't require the human interaction that they did before. Now it's all about data and networks and models and the intangible stuff. It's all about the AI driven world that we're really in. So that's changing the employment model. Do we work in businesses? Do we hire people full time? Do we hire permanent people only, which is pretty much the reality? Or do we start looking at more flexible employment opportunities? Do we start hiring freelancers and more fractional roles? And that requires changing our legal system and the whole structure that our HR is built on. It's all sort of crumbling apart in a way. And I think that's going to accelerate over the next few months and even the next year. So things are not going to stay the same as they are. That's almost certain. And AI is growing so rapidly that I think this is maybe one of the most difficult things to really understand is the speed of the advancement and growth of AI. Everything else from the internet to electricity to the radio took a period of time. It took a few years to get there, maybe a decade to get there. So people had time to adapt. Laws had time to evolve. Politics had time to deal with it to some degree. AI is growing too fast for those. Those systems are not able to deal with the speed, nor are we probably able to deal with the speed. When you look at that blue line that says artificial intelligence, it's almost straight up. And the speed is just accelerating. So every day there's new announcements about what one system can do in another. So this morning, Claude announced that it's integrating with all sorts of stuff and going to be able to do things that required several separate applications to do. And now it can do it. You just ask Claude and it can do it for you now. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So when we say we can't, hire people automatically and so forth, I think that's a very false attitude. We may choose not to, but we can, and in some cases we will be automating lots of things that we may not today think we should automate. So growth is really fast, but our ability to adapt to it is really slow. And that's the geo problem. Human beings are not made for rapid disruptive change. Our brains don't work like that. Our organizations don't work like that. We don't move at the pace that technology is moving. And that's going to be a real difficult challenge for us to deal with, both psychologically, legally, politically, in every way. It's going to be a tough time to deal with this. And AI impacts every single thing. There's nothing that's not being touched by AI. So clearly, workforce is being restructured under our feet. We may not see it yet, clearly. I can see it. A lot of people can. Many people can't yet. But we're automating all sorts of things. We're reducing the need to have organizations with 1,000 people. When now that 1,000-person organization can be 200 people or 100 people, or maybe even 5 or 6 people. I was on a call this morning with a company in Israel, and they just decided they don't need any physical presence whatsoever. And almost all their workforce is 20 people, but they're doing millions of dollars of work. And these people are not in Israel, except for 1 or 2. So, I mean, this is the new model. This is the new world. And we were just talking about that earlier. So workers are moving toward different roles. They're going to be more around creativity, interpersonal relationships. It's not going to be about doing stuff. It's going to be about interacting and creating and evolving the world that we're in, shaping that world or helping to shape that world. The same is happening in healthcare. Healthcare is we're able to do diagnostics. Doctors are now using AI to help in their diagnoses. Apple has, ChatGTP has just released a health app that taps into all your Apple health data. If you're using an Apple Watch or phone, if you're using a fitness device, it taps into all that data and predicts your health, how it's going to be, what's going to happen to you. It can tell you you're about to have a heart attack. Early stages, Maybe not quite there yet, but it's definitely happening really fast. Personalized learning, the unis are in big trouble. I mean, how the enrollment in universities in the US is extremely low right now, way down. People are learning more on their own. They're figuring things out. They're doing more online learning, and that's not even a correct term. It's just they're figuring out multiple ways to learn what they need to learn. Some of it may be apprenticeship ships. So the value of a uni degree is declining, and who knows whether in 10 years we'll even consider them that critical. It may be more like a high school diploma, something nice to have. You should have one, but it doesn't mean that much. Automated recruiting, we'll talk more about that, obviously. In manufacturing, robots, self-driving cars, supply chain, automated supply chains. All these things are here now today. So AI is just everywhere. Well, the skills mix is shifting. I think many of us in recruiting already have seen this push toward away from credentials to more to capabilities. What can somebody actually do? I don't really care if they have a degree in programming. If they can write code and it's good, I'm happy. I'll hire them. So we're looking more at verifiable work results, more about validated performance, more on being able to solve a problem, being able to create or orchestrate or conduct, put together teams that can work smoothly. It's more about governance. Internal marketplaces are definitely growing in importance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I think continuous upskilling is absolutely critical. We have to stay up to date. A report just came out. I'm trying to remember where it was from. If I can find it, I'll put it. I'll give it to Joe to distribute to everybody. Just released a report on the people that are using AI in companies. The companies that are actually adopting AI are finding incredible benefits from it. This report came out from, I can't remember the name of the company. I'm really sorry. But anyways, I will get it. And this was a report from their head of HR that just came out and talking about what AR has done for the company. It's absolutely amazing. So when we say AI is not there yet, or it's not really that useful, it's proving to be very useful in the companies that are really, really adopting it and actually using it and not just kind of experimenting with it. So we're moving. Organizations are one of the most fundamental things that are changing. I think we're going to see, as I mentioned, the Israel case a minute ago, we're really moving away from the hierarchical pyramid, director, senior director, manager, worker, to much more platforms, to more open systems. The old model is the pyramid. Structure, work is divided into, jobs, departments. And everything flows up and down a chain. You belong to one manager. You're an HR. You do HR work. You don't do finance work. You don't do manufacturing work. If somebody asks you to go do something, you say, well, that's not my job. I don't do that. Marketing needs help. You're in sales, for example. You really can't easily help them because you're owned by the other organization. So, in a factory, you do your job. That's our old model. That's pretty much how we run. I'm a recruiter. I don't do other stuff. I don't do finance. Okay. But, we're evolving a new model, which is being called the platform. And this is where the company acts more as a facilitator than a dictator. It provides the infrastructure, maybe the culture, the tools, the budget, maybe the overall strategy, but the work organizes itself. Work flows to whoever has the right skill to solve a problem. We don't care about job titles anymore. That becomes much less significant. It's more about, can you do this work? Things are more divided into projects and skills where, we need this done. Can this group of people, can we orchestrate this group of people to do this thing, solve this problem? You might have a home base. You might be in HR, but you might end up working in different projects. This has been a model that's been used quite a bit by Google as a good example. Quite a few companies are using this model at some level, maybe on a smaller scale, but this is the new model that's emerging, and I think more and more organizations are going to adapt this. So when we're in an organization that looks at headcount and how many people are in HR and how many people are in this and that, and we're not looking at skills, we're looking at heads. That totally different model. So we start looking at who can do what, who can solve a problem, where can we get this thing done, how do we orchestrate these group of people to get this work done, is very different than the pyramid. So we've also got this whole new partnership with AI, and it is a partnership. It's going to become more and more integrated into our life. Many of us are already using LLMs as partners. We're using them. I probably use an LLM 10 or 15 times a day, and maybe a different LLM for different things. Lots of code, almost all code now is being written by LLMs. So we've got this thing where the role of a person becomes a different role. It becomes a partnership with the AI. So if we look at this graph, which I think is really excellent, it's not from me. The source is down there at the bottom, but I think it's really excellent. Basically, we have some jobs that AI is going to do the whole job, and we're not going to have any problem with that. Like transcribing this whole conversation and sending it out to you a minute after we're done, translating from one language to another, automatic, just instantly done. We're not going to cry about losing that particular ability. AI is going to do it and do it well. And these things are going to just become completely automated, and we'll expect them to be automated. Kind of like we don't expect an operator in the elevator anymore. We do it ourselves, right? Moving over to the quality control box, where AI is going to produce the work, but we're going to quality check it. We're going to have to evaluate. This is where we are in HR. This is where we are in recruiting. Recruiting may recommend people for jobs. It may screen people, but our job is to verify that, validate that, provide the human component to that piece. That piece is going to become a critical piece, but it's a partnership. Rather than doing it, we're checking it, we're quality controlling it, and we're augmenting it. Up here in the creative catalyst box, our AI will create options for us, but we're going to select which option we want to do. It'll say you can do this or that, you choose. It may create creative content. It may write an ad for you or a job description, and you'll say, yeah, that's okay, but I want this one, or I want to tweak this one. So it'll be a real helper in the creative world. And I think we're going to see this in the movie industry. Hollywood is already very afraid of this, where AI can create whole movies, including the video, the actors, the fake, the AI robotic actors and everything. Where's the role of the creative writer? Is an actor or an actress going to even exist in a decade? We don't know. These things are really changing. And then there'll be some things that are clearly human first and maybe human only, which are in that other box. Setting strategy, integrating things, orchestrating things. These are really going to remain for the near future, at least, totally human. And humans are necessary to do that. So when we look at HR and you look at HR, what part of HR is going to be in which one of these boxes? Who's going to be in the creative catalyst box? What part is going to be in the human first box? So we're going to have to rethink what HR and recruiting is all about, and where do we play in this partnership? And the demographics are just a huge factor that I think we tend to discount this. We don't really pay attention to it. It's almost an invisible problem, but we're getting old. Australia is getting very old. America is getting very old. All the world is getting old. Japan is old. So we have fewer babies being born. We have huge constrictions right now on immigration. Nobody wants immigration anymore. This is a negative thing now. Despite the fact that we never have needed more immigrants more, we need them more than we've ever needed them before, but the political environment is not positive for that. So we have smaller domestic labor pools. We need workers that need continuous upskilling, and in order to deal with this population shrink, we're going to have much more flexible work arrangements than we have today. We're going to have to really shrink the work down quite a lot to do that. So Australia will reach more people over 65 sometime around 2032 to 2035. So that's a big issue. When you got more people over 65 than under 18 contributing to your pension plans and so forth, this becomes a real, not contributing to the tax base anymore, taking from it, not contributing to it. Huge issues for companies.
Kevin,
yes.
We have a couple of questions, so this might be a good time to pause.
Sure.
Aurelio is commented here, I wonder how this kind of free-form model would land in Australia, given Australia's more kind of restrictive requirements when it comes to PDs and our requirements around performance management and fair work breaches.
Yeah. This is a problem. I mentioned it briefly. I said the political world. The politics are way behind the reality of what's happening in the workplace. In the end, legal system and the politics are going to have to change. They're going to have to be modified and grow and morph. I think that's a real challenge, not just for Australia, for many other countries that just, we put these in place. We've got strong unions. We've got strong political forces that are pushing it one way while AI and everything is pushing it the other way. It's going to be a real challenge. I don't have an answer to how it's going to get resolved, but it's not going to be pleasant. It's going to be painful. It's probably going to be very disruptive. It's going to be very Bonnie, very brittle. I think it's going to break. I think you're going to find that the system breaks when you can't get work done, when things aren't. You can't hire people the way the government and the lead laws tell you to hire them. What are companies going to do? How are they going to deal with it? Offshore stuff, do it remotely, use more and more AI, and just say to heck with people altogether. So these are the consequences of not changing some of these requirements, and it's a huge issue in Australia. Maybe a little less so in America, where we just kind of let it all flow wherever, for good or bad. But that's just, every country has a different approach, and it's going to be a real problem.
But a fairly litigious society as well. The US loves a class action. So I think we'll see a lot of this sort of stuff tested in court. That's for sure. But I guess it's then all about if you've got your existing workforce, then there's an element of how do we change the existing workforce. But when I talk to Nick Dougal or Maureen Agnew, when I talk to a lot of workforce planners, they're sort of saying they're seeing unprecedented amounts of legal advice queries around right-sizing organisations and headcount happening behind the scenes, like more than they saw during COVID. So clearly something's brewing in the background. And then, of course, there's a lag in terms of waiting to see what's tested in the courts. Michael's got a long comment, but then he's got a question. So he said, history shows that with major advancements in technology, for many people, there's a period of pain if they're displaced by the change or not benefiting from it or capitalising on it, before there needs to be some kind of normalisation or acceptance, especially for middle class, which is super important for a healthy economy. Your example of a small company driving huge profits and wanting to minimise their presence, like cost and staff, makes complete sense, but does not seem sustainable at a large scale over time. How should we as a society, or even as companies, be thinking about this long term? Do you think the right people have this as a top of mind?
Probably not. I don't think the politicians do. I don't think the leaders, the people that can actually change policy, including CEOs of companies, I don't think they're fully aware of what's happening. I think they tend to live in a much narrower world. They're more like a spot meter approach to things than a broad approach to things. This is going to be, I think, probably one of the most painful transitions the world has ever been through. Probably more so than the Industrial Revolution, that really, in effect, only impacted a couple of countries in the beginning. This is impacting everything in the world at the same time. China has a huge problem right now with unemployment. Lots and lots of young people are not employed. And surprisingly, many of them don't want to be employed. They're entrepreneurial. They're out there on their own doing things. This is changing everything. What if nobody wants to work for you? What if the model is, I'm going to do my own thing? And this is what's happening. This is happening in the US to a lesser degree. I think it's happening in Europe. It's these people I talked to in Israel. Many of them would probably have gone to work for some other big company, but they're not. So things are just changing, and it's going to be really painful for anybody whose skill set is replaceable by AI, particularly. And those are the people that are going to be hurt the most and more immediately. And I think, again, we don't really have built into our governments, our economic policies, any ways to deal with that effectively. We have a huge homeless problem here in the US. Much of that homeless problem is economic related. It's not that drugs play a part, but that's probably overblown, right? I think, why are they on the drugs? Where is society failing in creating meaning or giving people a reason to not take these drugs? So we've got a lot of societal issues, a lot of political and legal issues that I don't think we're dealing with at all, to be quite honest. A lot of people like myself and lots of people much more important than I am are talking about them. But I don't think that governments are really responding very effectively yet. I think that's just a huge issue.
I think you raise a good point with housing. I mean, some of the fastest growing segments of being unhoused are, people who actually have a full-time job, but actually can't get housing, or, women over 50, divorcing and finding themselves without stable accommodation. When you have a generation of people give up on the dream of home ownership, it doesn't tie you as deeply, because the thing that ties you deeply to having a stable full-time job is the bank's requirement for you to have a stable full-time job to get a loan. But if we have a generation of people who've given up hope of home ownership, then that kind of changes. Those things have a flow-on effect for those larger organizations who are going to continue to seek the traditional full-time employee.
I don't want to get way off base here, but the idea of home ownership is something that really didn't become dominant until post World War II. Before World War II, the majority of people rented houses; they didn't own them. And we built a banking structure. We built an economic model around home ownership, which encouraged full-time employment and allowed organizations to lock you into full-time employment to pay that mortgage. I mean, a lot of things are we don't realize how these systems interlock and reinforce each other. Okay. So a lot of people were independently employed prior to World War II. There were a lot of people on farms, a lot of people that were renting in big cities. Renting was normal. So home ownership is a relatively new phenomenon, but I don't want to get way off base here. We have
a few more questions. Stevens said, is Australia more at risk of a two-speed AI knowledge economy, given that we have a lot more rigor in segments like banking and finance and professional services?
Could you say that at the beginning of the question again? What's the rest of it?
Yeah, is Australia more at risk of a two-speed AI knowledge economy? Because I guess we are already quite heavily regulated.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Australia is particularly vulnerable here to that. You've got a small population, relatively speaking, and several very regulated industries, as you said, like banking and finance, that all may be more brittle than we think. And what happens if they all start snapping? and start falling apart. And I don't know that they will. I don't know if that's going to be the reality, but it's definitely possible given AI and the impact of AI. So what happens when the banking system just doesn't work anymore? What happens when all of these things that we've built pyramids on, basically the whole economy on, fall apart? In some ways, Australia's very dependent on the U.S. for some things and very dependent on China for other things. So you've got two major dependencies. A lot of your systems, military systems, infrastructure, all the software that you use for banking and everything is all US based. But your economy is heavily reliant on China, buying your coal and natural resources. So you've got two huge reliances, and how that plays out, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out. But if people are starting to look away from the US, Europe certainly is. When countries start to say, we can't be reliant on U.S. software because Trump may turn it off tomorrow, or may use it as a leverage point for tariffs. We need to have our own software, our own infrastructure. That leaves the banking system incredibly vulnerable. That leaves a lot of organizations really vulnerable. If China says we don't need coal anymore, or we're going to start, using more of our own resources, what does that do? So I mean, these are questions that Australia has, but every country has some similar set of circumstances the same way, right? So I think that a lot of the things that we've relied on people, as a strategic resource. This is the thing and like I said here, the talent reserve that we've relied on is disappearing with demographics, and that makes expansion really hard. That makes change even more difficult. An older and older workforce that's not really willing to change or adapt to AI. You've got a smaller, younger workforce less willing to work for these organizations. We're going to have to change how we think about work and labor. We're going to have a different mindset about it. And I think that, the comfortable model of, full-time permanent employment is really going to become very small segment of the workforce within a decade.
Well, Kevin, Lena's got a great question around this link to remuneration. If organisations move away from fixed job titles and towards skills and project-based work, how do you see remuneration structures evolving? What would pay be anchored to? Is it skills depth, market value, contribution, project outcomes?
Right.
And how would organisations ensure internal equity and fairness?
Well, I think equity and fairness are going to go out the door. I think that's an old-fashioned concept. Nice to have, but I don't think it's realistic. I think we're going to get paid for what you contribute. I look at it as a consulting model. What do you pay a consultant for? You pay a consultant for some sort of result, some kind of knowledge, hopefully, something they do. What do you pay a handyman for? That he successfully fixes whatever is broken, right? That, we're going to have the same model. It's not just showing up and doing whatever it is your credential says you should be doing. It's going to be actually contributing. And I think this next slide kind of gets to this a little bit. We're going to have to talk more about how we pay for performance and measurable performance. And we're going to have to figure out much better how we measure that performance and what that means. We're not good at that now. We don't do that. We really pay for time. That's what we pay for. We pay for you showing up every day and doing something. We don't know. A lot of people don't do much of anything. So the ones that actually contribute to the service, we have to figure out how do we pay them for that. So we're going to see more specialized networks, talent networks, skill marketplaces, kind of like freelance model where you put I can create a logo for you. You pay me and I'll deliver a logo for this amount of money. Project-based engagements are going to become much more the norm. Internal talent marketplaces, the gig market is going to grow. Contingent is going to grow. Is a huge part of this. We're going to see much more project-based teams and whole new models, performance pay models, governance models. It's all going to change. It's all in the process of changing as we speak right now. So I think we're going to have to look at talent as an ecosystem as opposed to a fixed pyramid of workers. It's going to be, you may have to tap into freelancers and contractors. You may have to use agencies. Definitely going to be project-based or subscription-based. You're going to have variable costs and pay for what you use, pay for the skill you use. A lot more rapid onboarding and deployment. We need you to solve a problem. The problem solved, goodbye. So specialist skills, scalable, flexible, very different model than we have today. Some people will stay in this traditional model. I'm not saying that's going to disappear, but it's going to get smaller and smaller over the next decade till it may become almost invisible. And this right-hand side is going to become far more the dominant model.
Kevin, can I ask you about this? Now, is that what you believe is going to happen because you believe that, you know, the organizations, the powers that be with all of the AI control are pushing it this way for their own benefit because this is a structure that suits them and it suits shareholders? Or are you saying that this is a better model to purposely go out and create because it's what is going to suit the majority of workers?
I think it's a combination of both of those things. I think the model we have right now, was built very specifically to employ people in manufacturing. That's what it was built for. It was a high volume, repetitive work model. Okay. And we hired hundreds, thousands of people to make cars or widgets or whatever it was. We built the HR team and the laws and rules we have to support and regulate those fixed workers. Okay. That's what we built it for. Up until the history of HR is very short. It's a 70-year history of HR. It's very short history compared to engineering that's got hundreds of years of history, okay? So it was an artifact. It was something we built specifically to enable the manufacturing companies to manufacture products efficiently, cost effectively, and regulate the workforce. That model is no longer relevant. So we have a new model emerging, and this is the new model. And in order to generate profits, we don't need 500 people. Amazon doesn't need 4,000 people in the warehouses anymore. Robots can do that. So they're going to absolutely drive this movement toward this more freelance. We hire you when we need you. If we don't need you, we're not going to pay you anymore model. Okay. But everything in our world, our economic system, our stock market, our legal system, our labor laws are all built on the manufacturing model that emerged largely out of 1920s, 1930s. Okay. That's when we began building this world that we're in. Before that, the world looked very different. The world was a very different place. I'm not saying it was better or worse. It was different. Okay. But this model we built is probably not sustainable in the current form. I firmly believe that. What it will look like, nobody has any real idea. I don't know what it's really going to look like, but these are the elements that are emerging. These are the kind of things that are starting to come out of this. And I think we need to just start thinking, if nothing else, just be aware that whatever you're doing today may disappear tomorrow suddenly and quickly, that it may be very brittle, and that something that you're very comfortable with today may just not be around 6 months from now or a year from now. We need to start thinking about how do I prepare myself and my team for some sort of a new world that's going to look more like this and less like the old one.
In reality, this talent as a service model where you've got freelancers and, you know, pay for what you use. I mean, there is an element of this that kind of goes, it puts some flexibility and some freedom and some ownership to dip in and dip out in the hands of the worker. But there's also a large group of workers who kind of, you know, do rely on something more protected and stable, and, you know, aren't really of the nature that want to go out there and, you know, get all of these disparate contracts for themselves, right? Yep. So, I mean, how much danger is there associated with moving down this talent? Is it like, I can see where it benefits Amazon, right? I can see where it benefits a group of people, but I don't know that is a model that necessarily is going to suit like an everyday Australian. who are already locked into mortgages. And so I just want to be clear that, are we saying that this is the way to go, or are we saying beware that this is happening underneath you?
I think it's beware. I don't think there's much we can really do about it as individuals. I think it's an inevitable economic force that's moving forward, and it's going to be, in the worst case, it will lead to revolution. It will lead to massive disruption of society as we adapt to this new world. And in a best case scenario, governments will adapt more rapidly than I think they have. We'll change legal systems. We'll develop new ways to tax automated work that can help to pay for people that aren't working and so forth. We're going to have to rethink all of these systems, our taxation system, where do governments get revenue? How do they derive revenue? A lot of this push in Australia toward full-time employment is to generate tax revenue, for the government. And when you have a lot of freelancers, they don't pay taxes sometimes at all, and sometimes very in not a regular way that a government can count on. So how are you going to get predictive tax money to run a government?
It's a hard one for the worker as well, right? Because we all want our full-time jobs so that we've got financial security and stability for our families. But I think, maybe tell us in the comments, if you won the lottery tonight, would you be at work next week? So there's that element of, please AI come and disrupt my life so I can, do less work. But then there's that financial tie to that, particularly for a system of people who are already tied to a mortgage. Kevin, I've got a couple of questions here that relate more to the recruiter and the HR and talent department. So I'll run through these. Katie has said, with this talent as a service model, where do you see the anchors of culture, engagement, and operating in jobs with more purpose?
I think the corporate culture one is a real interesting question. I think when you have you'll have smaller, much smaller companies, I think is going to be the future. You're going to have more teams. There'll be more team culture than it's going to be corporate culture. And I think you're going to have culture within teams, within smaller groups. There may be skill groups. There may be, I look at the consulting world, in the world of consulting that I've been in and Trevor has been in for 20 years or more. You have your own culture within that world. You have your own ways of doing things. You have your own connections, your own friends, your own. So I think the idea of culture is going to change. The concept is going to change. And corporate culture will remain for many companies. It'll still be there. But it's definitely going to be different when if you're looking at this slide right now, where this is all the possible kinds of work we could have workers. You could have part-time workers, temporary workers. When we say corporate culture, what that means, you're there full-time, permanent. That becomes part of your life. What if you're only there for a week, a day, a month? I'm a consultant. I go into a company to consult. Am I part of their culture now? Is that important? So we have to. These are tough questions.
So the work is strategically aligned, and then there's an element of the experience that people have and how we want people to engage and behave, but potentially these subcultures in various teams that may be a mix of insourced, outsourced, full-time, temporary, cross-functional. Briley's asked, do you see this model creating more small businesses who provide these services, like talent as a service?
Absolutely. I think you're going to see more and more small businesses emerging. I'm very doubtful that we'll ever see another Amazon or IBM or any of these large companies emerge. I don't think that model is viable anymore. I don't think it's not needed anymore because of AI and automation. We don't need 100,000 people. We don't need those many people. We don't need 50,000 people. We need a solid 100, 200, 500 people. This may be the full-time worker, the smaller, more special kind of person, supplemented and augmented by all these other people around it in this ecosystem. That I may be the HR person, but there's nobody but me in HR. And I use part-time work, I use contractors, I use consultants, I have my AI agent. I have all these things that I use to help me do my job.
You're the
But I don't.
orchestrator.
I orchestrate. That's it. An
Yeah.
orchestrator. Absolutely. And
There's
I think
one. Sorry, continue, and then I've got one more question.
No, I said I think that's the future. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Tom has said with this increased and required flexibility, a focus on pay for performance or consulting style work, will we see an increase in outsourced models? How do you think the traditional recruitment agency will react? You know, is there a lot more opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. I just wrote an article last week, I believe it was, on the future of RPO. And I think the future of RPO is extremely bright. I think RPO can provide this orchestration. They can provide you the talent you need when you need it. They can keep you compliant with laws. They can provide the technology. So agency, RPO, whatever, I think it's got an incredibly good future. I think much better than internal TA, which I think is very brittle. And I think I'll put it this way: if I was the head of TA for a company, I would probably go out and find a good RPO partner and use them and reduce my staff significantly. I just don't think there's any need for it anymore. I think good RPOs, and many of them are developing their own software, great software, great tools. I think the RPO model is very viable, and the modified agency model is very viable. Yeah. So I think we're going to be forced to utilize underutilized talent today, older workers as we get older, and we're going to have to shift from finding talent to enabling talent. You know, how do we make the talent? How do we and put it to use? Any talent, wherever it is, as opposed to looking at who they are and how old they are and what their background is. If they can do something, we need to enable them to do it. And I think the skill shift, we're seeing this already. Learning agility is going to become an absolutely critical skill as our jobs change, as our jobs maybe disappear. We have to quickly develop skills for the new work that's out there. We said skills had a half-life of 5 years. Some tech skills, I think maybe 2.5 years. I think that the life of a skill is probably really short in many skills. Obviously, skills, if you're a doctor or something like that, your skills are going to be fairly solid, but you're going to have to be able to adapt to how do you use AI, how do you incorporate AI into what you're doing, and what are the skills that AI will take away from you, and what are the skills that you're going to need to grow even bigger and make better. So with a doctor, it may be patient relationships, interaction with patients. It may be more the personalization of medicine as opposed to diagnostics, which maybe the AI can do. So we're going to have to change the skill set we have in order to do what we will deliver value to our customer. And I think we're going to see that everything gets distributed, including work, including pretty much everything is going to be distributed throughout the cloud and throughout the world globally. And I think it may be that we're going to have to utilize global talent because we're not going to have, with demographics, we're not going to have the talent we need. And let's just say in Australia, and with restricting immigration, which almost every country is now, it's going to make it more important to find the talent outside and figure out how do we use this talent remotely? How do we tap into that as a remote source of skills? And I think what we're seeing is the global world is not going away, but it's changing. And we were reliant upon energy globally, manufacturing globally, everything from China. We didn't do it at home very much. The car industry left Australia because we can get it from China or somewhere else. And I think that's going to start coming back to some degree. And I think we're already seeing this in America. This is the drive that Trump has really driven, and it may be a false thing, but I think there's some merit to it in that we have become too reliant on other people for certain things we absolutely need, like energy and physical goods, like toilet paper. But talent, design, knowledge work, that can be anywhere. that can be global, that can remain global. So I think we're going to see this reconfiguration or rethinking about globalization, kind of a 180-degree switch from thinking about globalization in terms of products and energy to thinking about globalization in terms of talent, services, design, knowledge, etc. So this is another major aha that I think is coming out of what's going on here. We still need to make a car in Australia or something like that. We need to certainly generate energy ourselves, but we can hire talent and we can get skills from anywhere in Asia or Europe or America. So it's a different way of thinking about things, very different here. And so I think, sort of sum up here, we have a lot of constraints to change. Really, it's very hard for us to let go of the past. It's very hard to let go of what we're comfortable with and what we know. Nobody ever voluntarily lets go of the status quo. We struggle very difficult. We really struggle to imagine what the world could look like. That's what we're struggling with right here today. And we're probably scared to death, which is that whole part of that Bonnie, incomprehensible. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. I have no idea. That's just normal. That's the way it is. We're human. It's a normal thing. But I think that AI is taking recruiting into, more and more unexplored territory, both legally and ethically, from sourcing and screening. We know we have autonomous agents are out there. They can do big chunk of the recruiting, in some cases 100% of it, with no human involvement whatsoever. What's the legal side of this? How do we deal with this? We've got quality and speed changes, and we need to be better at assessing the quality of the output of these agents. We need to have better skills and understanding how the algorithms work and what they're actually doing. Be able to explain these things better to candidates. We need to rethink the whole workflow and how that plays out. And we had a whole new recruiter skill stack, which is more about orchestration, market intelligence, being more literate around AI, being able to influence stakeholders, explain things to senior leadership better, figure out how do we define results, how do we develop a pay, so develop a pay system for what people deliver. We've got a lot of things on our plate in recruiting that have less and less to do with sourcing and interviewing and all the traditional things that we used to do in recruiting. It's exciting, a lot of potential, but it's completely different. It's a 180-degree change, and requires a lot of new skills if we're going to be successful in as this brittle disruption takes place. So I think these are the key things: orchestration. How do you orchestrate AI? And I would add, how do you orchestrate a talent ecosystem? How do you really focus more on ethics, trust, storytelling, the personalization of things, keeping the human involved in this? How do we think more about looking at the whole marketplace out there, capacity planning, modeling? Where are we going to get talent as the demographics change? How are we going to get talent if we don't have it in Australia? Where's it going to come from? How do we get it? What laws and attitudes need to change to make it possible? And obviously, we're going to have to continuously learn and stay on top of things as much as we can. So I think it's really moving from augmentation, which is kind of where we're at now. We're playing with it. We're heavily moving into the agentic model, where the agents are doing our work, and ultimately we have to move into orchestration. So our role and human role is governance, culture, ethics, personalization. AI's role is managing all that stuff we used to do, and it's no longer necessary for us to do. And I think thanks very much.
Yeah, terrific, Kevin. And I think there's a couple of immediate things. Like, there's a lot in the long term, but there's a few immediate things where we're still working in the old system, but we're trying to understand the impact of the new. Lena was writing here about, the amount of candidates using AI to generate highly optimized, a little bit exaggeratory CVs. We actually have a lunch coming up on that in Sydney in February about this exact, like, how do we qualify? So moving into the skills world, but how do we qualify skills on these highly optimized CVs that have all been written by AI? That's certainly something that I think talent teams will need to turn their attention to, because it goes as deep as candidate fraud. And we talked a lot about that at the conference. We had a session around the depths and lengths of the the real person with a little bit of inflation versus this is not a person, or it's a group of people out to work through untrusting methods and then kind of pass that work on to other parties, which is a real kind of IP issue. And then, of course, even as deep as the North Korean national fraud scheme as well, that Australian companies have already been caught up in. One of the other things around communications, I think, is really important, because what we're seeing now is that a few more people put their hand up and sort of say, well, hang on, is it AI assessing me? They're making assumptions. This is really bad for the brand of recruitment teams. It's really bad for organizational brand and trust as well. So I think there's got to be a lot more proactive communications out there about how we're using AI, the role of the human, how and when the candidate can use AI. Like that, I see as being something quite immediate. Would you agree, Kevin?
Can I just throw in one thought? I just want to throw one thing in. We say candidate fraud. Is using a power tool fraud when I could use a screwdriver, but I use a power screwdriver?
No, yeah.
So I'm using a tool
to
help me achieve a goal. I don't like the word fraud. I guess I say that. So I know we're using that. I see it all the time out there. But
we're talking fraud in the sense of the person applying for the job is not actually human.
Yeah. Okay. That's true. I get that.
Yeah.
But I think AI agents can determine whether it was another robot that wrote that or not. And there's some new tools out there that can do that now. So there's a lot of interesting stuff coming. But for everything that happens is a counter tool, right? So anyway, but yeah, it's great stuff. Yeah.
I think, we've had a lot of recruiters already say that they've experienced this. They've been in an interview and gone, I don't think I'm talking to a person. Maybe you can share in the chat if this is happening in your organization. Lovely. Well, listen, there are a few other questions we don't have time for today, but I will pass them over to Kevin, and we will share the recording of today. We will share the slides. Kevin has a terrific blog at Future of Talent as well, and he writes a lot that goes up on our ATC comms as well. So if you go to the ATC website and search Kevin Wheeler, you'll get a history of all the things that he's written for us in the past few years. But thank you so much, Kevin.
Hey, you're welcome. Lots of fun. Good luck.
I'm not sure we provided anyone any comfort today whatsoever. But it's certainly a look into what's happening and the fact that we're certainly not facing it alone. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone online. And we hope that you'll join us at some of our up and coming events. We have a talent leader lunch in Sydney on the 26th of February. We have the Contingent Workforce Forum in Sydney on the 13th of March. The State of TA survey at the end of February. Currently, the State of Contingent Workforce survey is out. If you manage contractors and casuals of any form, we'd love you to participate on that. And of course, we hope we see you at the big one. We are locked and loaded for 13 and 14 October back at Fed Square for ATC 2026, our special 20th year edition. So thank you so much from us at ATC HQ, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.